Hello, FewCandy here, and welcome back to Few Orleans. And today we're just going to be expanding out Lafayette over here. But before we start today, I do just want to address one thing that's come up a lot in the comments, and that's about me using these alleyways a lot. So it does say in the description that there is no sidewalk, however, the pedestrians still walk along it, as you can see here, so they just walk along the kind of dark strip on the edge. All it means is that there's no visual of an actual sidewalk like you see on some of the main roads. But it still acts and functions as if there was a sidewalk, and it doesn't interrupt traffic because they're not walking where the cars actually flow. And the reason really that I use these is because I just prefer them in certain locations than these kind of much bigger looking roads. I feel like they look like more kind of local streets, and these roads, actually even the small ones, are pretty wide really in comparison, and it also stops cars from parking along them. So using them in back streets or little residential neighbourhoods is really where I quite like the visual effect of it more than anything else. So coming on to the plan for today, we're going to be doing a few things around Lafayette. We definitely need a population boost. We've got very high demand for people. If you remember back to the last episode, we managed to reduce our unemployment down to, well, it's at 8.4% at the moment, so not too bad at all. But I definitely think we could use some more people in here, maybe a little bit more industry. If we make it to level 8, we'll be able to put in some oil, and we've got some nice oil resources down against the river over here, so we'll be doing that. But mainly just continuing on our city and trying to get this happiness up as well is something I do want to address. But the first thing I do want to do today is add in the football field that I mentioned ages ago we were going to put in here. So we did unlock with our development points the large sports parks. And I'd like to place in the soccer field into this area to have a kind of like sort of out of town local soccer team. So the front of the building is there. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and place it kind of centrally within this space over here. And then I'd like to sort of mock up some grassy football fields over this side, some just areas that people can use for recreation more freely than this little very small stadium. Like, these are kind of the biggest stadiums we get in the game at the moment. I'm sure a stadium pack is on its way and coming further down the line, but for now this is kind of what we get. So I think it makes a nice community football field here. I think instead of coming off the main road, let's create an entrance off this side road over here. So we'll come out directly up to the building and then directly along it like this. And I think a little bit of parking would be nice here, so let's go ahead and drop in a smallish car. Do we want a large one? I'm thinking a smallish car park. We'll probably have a park and ride like bus stop, I think, coming into the football field to serve anyone else like that, but I think that will do for now. And I've just chosen this because it's a nice location kind of as you come into the city. You'll sort of see these stands in the background with the, well, I say city, this will be a town really more than anything, with some of that built up infrastructure in the background. So I quite like this position. Also shades a bit of the residential that we'll have up here from this industrial, or maybe this side a bit more, but acts to nicely fill this space while protecting from some of that pollution over here. So then, yeah, alongside it, I would like to use some path networks just to create some open green spaces that people can use to kick a ball around in their free time. Sort of adjoined to the main football stand, but away from it, so it's more like public use grounds, I suppose, is what I'd like to do here. So I'm going to draw in a footpath alongside our pitch like this, and then we'll connect it up to the road here. Let's actually just turn off snapping for this so we can get a bit of greater control. Coming in like that, and I'll bring it down to the road there because that doesn't look visually like it's connected properly there. This is also saying it doesn't have road access, which is confusing me. Let me just delete out that path. And that's gone away. So for some reason adding in the path there is telling us that it now needs road access. So let's come a little bit further away from the stadium and see if we can just connect it straight in there without issue, which we can. Again, assuming that that is a bug. And we'll connect the path up this side, and then we're going to create just some nice little open square spaces like I mentioned. So it looks a little bit random, but we can make some little like makeshift five-a-side football training fields around our grounds here, and attempt to detail them up with some nice trees I think around them, some little tree borders. or something, but we'll keep those areas obviously as open grass. Just a few small, very carefully placed clusters of tree around here, just so we can keep some nice open space around some of the areas of the pitches where family, friends, etc. could stand at the sidelines and watch, that sort of thing. So it looks a little bit rough, but it's a kind of nice way to use paths, which is one of the very few detailing aspects that we actually get in this game. So hopefully once those trees have grown up, it will sit in a little bit better. But there we go, we've got our football field in, so a nice piece of recreation for our town. So the next thing that I do want to do is actually go back into our development tree and unlock the welfare office. Now the reason for this is because the welfare office provides financial support for low-income citizens, which increases their well-being and lowers the likelihood of recurring crime. So we're going to unlock that. The reason for this is, well, a moment ago I did have a few crime scenes around here, but we have seemed to have disappeared, so the police have taken control of those, which is great news. But we also want to add in a bit more low-income housing because we've got quite high demand for that at the moment. So what I would like to do is place this in and increase the happiness and the well-being of people around this area, and that will mean as well that we'll have less chance of that low-income housing abandoning, which seems to happen fairly regularly. Now the welfare office actually sits pretty perfectly into this spot here, and I also feel like this would be quite a nice appropriate place for it. It's just off the main high street, it's behind like the firehouse and some office buildings that we have in here. Still haven't spawned in, but never mind. It's quite a nice little grand building, I think, to sit alongside some of our higher density assets here, mixed in with some of this lower commercial as well. So I think that this looks good in this space. I do not like this garage, like multiple garages next to each other though, so I'm actually going to go ahead and delete both of those out and hope that something else grows in there instead. There we go, so we have now got the welfare office in. We can select the operating district, so I think I will go ahead and actually do that, and we're going to select Lafayette for this, which covers this whole entire area here. And then with that, we're going to add in a bit more housing. We really need to get our population up, which is going to help our budget, which is kind of fluctuating from the green into the red at the moment. And obviously plopping the welfare office is not going to massively help with that. So we're going to concentrate in this little area here, getting a few more of the larger, medium density and high density buildings in to get some residents in and increase that population. So I think we'll just start by bringing a straight road out of here, which is nice and close to the pedestrian crossings. They've got easy access into town. Now this is a bit of a problem, and this really impacts traffic if you have a pedestrian crossing that close. So we do actually just want to delete that out, and I think that has now removed the node, which it has, because yeah, it kind of creates an extra node, so we'll just have it going straight into here without producing a crossing. So if you're having trouble with pedestrian paths and things like the paths actually changing your zoning, it's usually because you have connected it in like this so that it forms a crossing, or if you join it in like that. Instead, just go close up to the road like here, and it will still connect, pedestrians can still use it, but it won't form that extra kind of, well, it used to be a node function, it's not so much in Cities 2, but it will kind of produce essentially a division in the road at this point, which you don't want. So that will cause you problems. So that's the way to get rid of that. So I think actually along this main street, I think we will have some of the lower income housing, some of the high density. Now we need to be careful about zoning these, because obviously as soon as we zone one building, that bar dramatically decreases. So go for quite a large building here and see how that pans out. And then while we're waiting for that, let's create a nice little medium density complex round the back of here. So I'm going to turn off snap to guidelines, we'll keep onto our nice grid for this, and we'll keep going to the length there. I think we'll bring up another road this side, and then can we actually fit in a nice little playground or something for them in here? We can, so let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll get our, I think we want to go for North American actually. I think I've done the wrong style here, so let's just make sure that that is definitely North American low rent housing, which is really what I'd want here. And then we'll go for some nice big blocks of the medium density assets. And of course, because we can't really detail in this game, the one thing we are going to do is also add in parking around it as appropriate too. So I'm actually thinking here, because we're using the 1-unit roads, which is another huge benefit actually of using them. Let's bring out a side road off the back here, which we can place our little secure car park on, like that. We then have room for a nice little pedestrian pathway behind the back here, which all of these things kind of combined just help create a little bit of interest in these areas, I think. And then we'll go for another slightly different size of zoning in there, and potentially another large block, maybe a similar size here. I'm hoping the orientation will be different. No, it has to come out along this road, even though the entrance actually isn't covered by that road, which is interesting. So let's delete out that road. And then, yeah, the orientation will change for that. So that'll give us a little bit more of a dynamic and authentic look in our little housing complex here. So now here, we've had this low income building, actually 120 households as well in this. There must be really, really tiny accommodation. We've had this spawn in, so I think actually what would be nice next to it, and because we've got quite high commercial demand, is some of the larger mixed density buildings. So let's again just make sure we're on the North American theme here, and I think we'll start getting some of these in along this side. Again, just being quite careful about our zoning, as I always am in this game. And we've got 2 blocks in here, different orientations, so I quite like this. We've got 38 households in each, so that's going to be a nice boost to our population. We're back making money again, which is great news. But I think actually in terms of economy, the taxation, there was actually a couple of comments to this effect, but lowering the taxes on our educated, well-educated, highly educated will actually encourage them to move in. So I think let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to reduce all of these to 12%. And I think we'll raise up uneducated just a little bit to 8%, because that should still be relatively favourable taxes in there. If we go to city information, we can then see they still think taxes are high. I don't know if that takes a little bit of time to adjust, but I think we'll leave it there just in the interest of still attempting to make money. It still looks like we are even on that basis, so that's good news. But that should hopefully level the playing field a little bit in terms of the amount of educated people we're getting moving into the city. So if we go to our education tab as well, we can see that here, like we're definitely rebalancing from where we were a couple of episodes ago, getting more of those educated people in, particularly as they progress through our education system. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully that will encourage a little bit more demand on the residential side as well, because we do need that residential expansion in here. Let's go ahead again with a slightly different size block, so I think we'll go for a 4x4 in here. Oh, and we have unlocked a new signature building with that, which is quite exciting, which is the Polaris Suites. I forgot we also have the dairy house we ought to put in at some point. So the Polaris Suites, let's get off the horrendous information view if we can and see where this might actually fit in quite nicely. This could even sit out this side. I'm thinking the orientation will probably be nicer. Let's turn off snap to roads. We can actually position it. Something like this, so that when you're driving in along this road here, I mean, it is a very large building, so maybe not. I'm thinking not round the low income. I feel like it's probably more of a medium income. It now doesn't tell us what we actually had to do to unlock it though, but I'm pretty sure it's medium density to unlock this. So we could put it as part of this complex here actually, and maybe that would be quite a nice thing to do. So let's actually grab our roads here. Let's have another large road coming out here. Again, making sure we're snapping to that grid where we can, like that. And then can we place the building? Let's turn on snap to roads again. Place the building on this corner here, and that's got us to level 8 as well, so that's good news. We are banking a ton of development points here as well. Again, if you haven't seen my top tips video, highly recommend watching that. One of my big tips is do not spend them unless you actually plan on using them. For exact reasons like this, so we've got a lot banked up so we could get some of those bigger things if we wanted to add those into our city. So I'm just looking at this from different angles because it is quite a dominant building. And actually I think I'm liking that placement. We need something in front of it to help it kind of build up to that point. But it's quite a nice little signature building there, and I like actually the park kind of going up against the road here. It's a shame that doesn't quite join up, so we could reconfigure this road slightly so that it's more straight up to this point and then curves across. But I think for now that will do nicely. So then from here we do want to start bringing out more road networks behind it to build out this side of it. So let's bring out another road here alongside our grid, which we can start to place some more housing on. And I think in the middle of this I'd definitely like some slightly larger park area behind the building here. So let's maybe add a tennis court. Would that go in here? It's very orange, but I think it will suit nicely. So yeah, that's starting to look a little bit better in front of the Polaris suites here. So yeah, quite happy I think with that integration. We might do a couple of little low density commercial buildings around the front of it. I think leaving some nice open green park space would be needed there. Now these are very big. And right next to this, I'm not sure I'm loving this. So I think what we're going to do is actually create a pedestrian pathway round the side of this building here. And then out to connect up to this road, which is just going to make that zoning there a little bit smaller. Hopefully something will come in there. Yes, something is building up there already, so that's good news. That one's very large. I think we'll keep that, but I just didn't like it too much, kind of in a repeated pattern row there. So let's have a little bit more of this and then maybe integrate some of it with more of the low rent housing. Now we've got a little bit of high density demand too. We do also now have high density because we have reached level 8. So we could experiment with putting a tiny bit of that in, but we need to be pretty careful and pretty selective about this. So I think let's actually try and see what it looks like with just a very small block of that in here. It could be too much. Yeah, see already that's come up to a very, very tall height, even for that kind of small zoning of it. If we go for I'm just wondering if we can do that. Yeah, that's a little bit more reasonable. So let's maybe try that instead. Actually, we'll try a 2x3. Start off with. Yeah, that's a bit more of a reasonable height for this area. I don't want it going too much taller than that really. Let's undo that little bit of zoning in there. So we'll see how that comes in and whether it fits with the mixed usage zoning that we've got next to it there. Now the other thing I'm noticing is we've got an awful lot of parked cars on the roads here. So I'm thinking as a way of making a little bit more money, because we're back in the red by a fair amount actually now. It does fluctuate quite substantially, is we're going to put on the roadside parking fee here. So let's come into here and I'm going to adjust it up to, I'm going to say $25 to park on the road. We could go even higher, we could go right up to $50 in fact. Let's just do it and see what happens. A lot of our car parks are actually reasonably full down here. And there's still a few spaces actually in some of them. So that's not too bad. So let's give it a bit of time and see what happens with this on-street parking. Here I do definitely want to get rid of that fact though, so let's go for a nice grass median along this road and that will get rid of a lot of that on-street parking for us. The other thing I do want to do is just bring in this road connection here, so let's make sure we've got contour lines turned on. I think what we are going to do is bring this out pretty straight along here, so let's actually just spread this road out a little bit further. And then if we draw that in at a nice right angle, yeah, I think we can make these meet up in the middle. It's still pretty flat around here, so that's not too much of a problem at all. Let's turn on guidelines for this and then we'll get a nice smooth curve in. So that'll connect up the back of these residences through to the Spencer Smith office park over here. So later when we come to do the detailing, we'll just continue to flesh out some of this residential pattern along here. We definitely want more commercial though. Oh look, at that high density demand is now going up quite a lot. We still haven't got this building in to see what it looks like. We could definitely experiment with a little bit of that in and amongst our medium density over here, I think. Even just like very small little 2x2 blocks like this. We might see what that looks like. It could be really bad, so we may just revert to some of the low rent housing, which is probably a bit more appropriate, I think, for this area here. But let's see how we go with that, and yeah, like I said, we'll finish that off in the detailing. But that's the kind of principle of that area and how I like to zone in some of that higher and medium density. But another thing I have actually been neglecting is our communications. So we do have the post office in, and there's a huge bug with that because we've got +8 on reliable mail service. We have one post office in over here. No mailboxes, in fact. And that is managing to give a reliable post service to our entire city, which makes zero sense whatsoever. So we're not going to worry about that. But telecoms is something that we have completely neglected. And if we hover over our happiness icon down here, you can see unreliable internet service is at a -2 at the moment. So we want to correct that and add in some nice little radio masts and things to get this up. But yeah, it would definitely be good to get in some radio masts, potentially even some telecom towers. So if we have a little look at development points here, the telecom tower is 4 points. I know we want the water treatment plant, and we're going to probably come onto that next time. I just want to make sure that we've got the budget to be able to afford that. So I think in the meantime we can afford to spend 4 points on our telecom tower. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll unlock that there. So if we just take a little look at the difference between them, this one has a much larger upkeep per month, actually I'm noticing it now, so maybe we don't want that. It says network capacity 3000 gigabits. Does it actually tell us how much we actually need in here at the moment? It does not. So it doesn't tell us how much we need, but it does tell us the capacity, which is interesting. And this has a 1 kilometre range, this has a 5 kilometre range and 15,000. So it is literally 5 times bigger than our little radio mast here. But it's a lot more than 5 times the cost. So actually I may have just made a mistake spending 4 development points on that, because I think for now we're actually probably going to stick to the radio mast for this. Now I would like one kind of on the entrance into our city. I'm wondering if actually around almost in our little football area over here might be quite nice for this. Let's just position it at a slightly off angle, I think. So we'll go something, let's stop snapping to road for this. So I think that's the entrance there. Let's go for an angle like this here. Then we can just connect that in with a nice simple dirt road. Like that. So that'll kind of sit in front of our city as you're driving into it there. This is all looking pretty built up. I do not know what's going on with that. There we go. Level of detail a little bit screwed there. So we've got that radio mask in. So what kind of coverage does that give us? That's given us fairly decent coverage down this end of it. It probably would be good to have another one in the Spencer Smith office park. We could just incorporate this actually into one of the little office park areas that we have. But actually I think somewhere right in the middle might be quite nice for this. So let's just add it along the main road here. I think it needs a separate road in this area, and then that kind of serves our office park over this side. Probably want one somewhere actually fairly central in this city, which would be an interesting complex. So it could be actually we put it on the corner of our little development over here, which would serve this area quite well. And the other thing we do need to consider as well, there are upgrades to it. So we can increase the network capacity, or we could increase the range. Now I actually think this one's probably quite good. Neither of them cost very much a month, so it's not really kind of a cost factor that we need to worry about. So let's add that onto there. I don't think on the others we actually need that same requirement, so that'll probably do fairly nicely. And then it could be we add another radio mast somewhere down here, maybe out by the farms, right on the entrance to the farms. Could be quite a nice location. And again, I think I am going to add the upgrade to that just to increase the radius of which it serves. So let's have a little look. So that area is really well covered now. Shouldn't have any problems there. And then we just want to come back to Arcadia and find some suitable locations here. With 3 towers out here, we're pretty well covered there. Our budget is taking a hit, but we do have +5 on reliable internet service now, so they're obviously very happy with that, which is great news. Well, the next thing I do want to have a little look at today before we come on to just fleshing out our suburbs and finishing off our medium and high density little housing district over there is oil. As we've reached level 8 now, we have now unlocked that, and we do have an oil pocket right here. Now, this is not ideal for this town because we're doing suburbs, or the plan originally was to do suburbs out in this area. But I think what we can do is just use a little bit of this oil over this side to create a small oil area that's going to fit into our kind of waterfront industry. And then the suburb can really flow out around the farms this side, and then definitely up the hill surrounding our medium and high density district the other side as well. So that's the general plan. But how we actually execute this to make this look nice is going to be interesting indeed. Because oil actually is pretty rare on this map, so we have one really quite dark, deep pocket over here, a little bit on the island, but the rest of it is, I think, outside of the city boundaries. Like, there's tiny bits on these islands, which I don't really know the feasibility of us actually using. But yeah, it's basically only these few pockets here, so we want to try and use it if we can, because we have no way of moving it or putting it somewhere else or that kind of thing. So otherwise we'd have to import a lot of oil, and really my idea is to try and import as little as we can in this city, of course, once all of those bugs are fixed. So let's just get our terrain tools here, and we're going to have to do a little bit of smoothing out and shaping around this area. So let's get quite a small brush size. So I think we're going to create a flat plateau round about here, which are going to bring out some of the oil on. I do need to check where the actual resources are, because they're a bit further back than I actually think that they are. Yeah, so they're right up here. So essentially I think what we're going to do is try and use this area here for oil. So now that I've terraformed there, I can see where it is, so we can use that a little bit better. So let's actually just flatten the land at this point. And we're going to create a kind of tiered area for this so that it looks a little bit more interesting. We're going to come up and have one tier at the top here and another tier below it, and we could probably stretch this out a little bit further, I'd say, like that. And then we want this road to slope down here. So let's go from about this point up to here, and we'll get a nice smooth slope that our road can sit on going round the coast here. Let's just add that into that point there. Now, also thinking about the residential, we obviously need to leave a very clear boundary around our industry here, otherwise it will very much disturb the peace. So let's actually just outline a kind of road that we won't do residential on this side of it. So this is going to flow down the hill here. Again, we need to be pretty careful of this topography because the buildings are going to end up looking hideous because this is too steep to just straight mass zone on, because it will look awful. All their gardens will be kind of sunk into each other, and yeah, it's just not a good look whatsoever. So now with the oil, let's bring out a couple of roads we can position the main buildings on. So I'm going to use just dirt road, I think, for this. We may change it to concrete if that looks better afterwards. This will do for now. I'll bring out concrete here because we'll do some more industry around it. And then let's get in some oil areas. I think what we will do is go for a tactic of trying to sort of surround our main buildings with the actual area again. So something along those lines. Let's hope not too many buildings spawn in there. And then we'll continue this. We can reshape the land a bit afterwards, but I want to make sure we're getting kind of really very rigid, very square areas in here. So something along those lines. We have now got a massive drill spawned in there. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and just flatten the land around these areas, because then we'll do some nice grassy banks around them just to kind of protect it and make it seem very purposeful. So I actually added in a third one down the bottom here, and we're actually now making use of most of this oil resource, it would seem. Like, we've got a little bit over here, but if we look at our production tab as well, we're fluctuating in and out of money. I was making about 8,000 not that long ago, and it's now minus 2,000. But in oil, yeah, we're not really using any of what we're producing at the moment. That will change over time, but at least we're in a surplus for the moment, so that is good news from that point of view. Yeah, I'm quite enjoying this kind of tiered approach to it. We haven't got too many oil rigs drilling in, and we will put in a few nice little trees just to shade the residential that will be this side from all of this pollution. But I'm thinking, because the wind direction is heading over here, yeah, you'll see that pollution is just heading over this island, so this does make a lot of pollution, but it shouldn't really impact residential over this side too much at all. One thing we do want to watch out for is the geothermal plant, which should be green energy, but does produce some air pollution for some reason from that. But yeah, the wind direction is definitely in our favour for where we've put that. So yeah, I think it is now time to come onto a relatively large expansion. So we'll continue out our suburbs around Lafayette this side, and obviously finish off this medium and high density bit of district we've got here. The high density that's coming over here, I'm actually quite enjoying. I quite like this little building here, so not too worried about that. This is actually the same building but a slightly different zone size, so it's got less concrete around it. But that for high density and for our little kind of medium height, medium sized town looks pretty good. So that was a pretty sizable expansion of Lafayette, and I'm really loving this view from over here with the farm kind of on the slope in front of it, and yeah, all the suburb kind of spilling out around the main town centre now. Looking really good indeed. Now, we are up to 7,500 people and it's still climbing. We are making decent money. This was actually up to plus 9,000. It seems to be pretty much staying in the green. Yeah, you can see it's going up there again already. So we're doing well. In terms of the roadside parking, we're making money on that as well. Again, that is fluctuating quite a lot. It's been quite considerably higher than that. So that's looking pretty good from that perspective. However, since I actually recorded the episode and now I'm recording the end, there has been an update, a hotfix patch on the game, which has changed their preference for on-street parking to actual parking lots. So it definitely appears like we have less cars on the street because of this, but there's still quite a few. But our car parks are still really nicely full, as they were before anyway, actually, before the patch anyway. So I don't think it's changed that much. There's definitely slightly less, but I don't know if that's because we've introduced the roadside parking fee policy or if it's because of the patch. So that kind of remains to be seen. But yeah, it certainly seems like it's reducing. But we've still got all that demand up for residential, and our taxes, I'll just show you, are now at 8% uneducated and 10% for everyone else. So it's sitting pretty even actually, and nice and green, so they shouldn't be complaining about it. Yeah, taxes is now a positive. They are saying there's a problem with labour availability, so we may have yeah, the unemployment is climbing. It's only 12% though, so it's not too bad. If we just look at educated as well, there's a marked increase in the number of educated people here too. So that poorly educated and uneducated is definitely going back down. If we have a look at workplaces as well, it's actually pretty well balanced. We do have a lack of well-educated, not so much the highly educated, but well-educated people. So we'll want to kind of keep our eye on that and see how that goes, but it's looking pretty good since the expansion. Now, one thing, just looking at the suburbs as well, I didn't do it here because I wanted to show you, but this is what you get when you zone in an entire block all of the same kind of depth. It looks very, very repetitive, very heavily repetitive indeed. If you do what I did around a lot of this suburb and kind of vary up the depths, like here's a perfect example, it starts to look less repetitive, even though it's the same asset. These are all 2 wide zones here, but varying depths just gives it a little bit of interest. Same goes for down here as well. We just varied up some of those depths and it starts to look just that little bit different. So you can see that here. And it definitely feels less repetitive and less varied, but still like it could be a housing development. You know, the same developers come in and made the same houses, but they're set back from the road slightly differently. So I really, really like that effect. So that's a big recommendation of mine when it comes to low density residential. Like here again, we've got 3 repeated, even though actually that's a 3 wide, these are 2 wide. But with the different depths in here, it gives it so much more variation. So yeah, big tip when it comes to doing your suburbs there. We need to go through and kind of act on that in certain places and sort out some of the previous zoning that we had in to make that a little bit more pleasing to the eye. We have of course now added in extra road networks around our farms, obviously added in this suburb, a little bit of more spaced out housing down here, so much more kind of relaxed in this area. Hoping that some of these will upgrade to some nice big houses. We managed to get some actual 4x4 lots in here, so hopefully they'll upgrade and look fabulous down there. I did actually add in some little piles into our oil area, but I did notice one of the trucks trying to drive over it, which was a little bit interesting. So we may go back and change that. But I'm kind of liking how this sits in, and these people are absolutely fine from all pollution point of view. So because the wind's going this way, it's taking the pollution over there, so they're not affected by that. Ground pollution isn't so significant, again, that it's spilling out into their homes, into their areas. Noise pollution is kind of buffered from this line of trees that we have here, so it's not too bad. And of course water pollution won't affect them anyway, so actually having residents this close to oil is perfectly possible as long as you've got that wind going in the correct direction. So we did also add in just this little kind of like extra expansion down here, a little bit more housing and a little bit more commercial. Well, that was the other thing, building on a slope. So yeah, here you go. We see we've got massive slopes here. If we put all of these zones in next to each other, it would look hideous, like the ground gets pushed up and it looks absolutely awful. But because we've kind of spaced those out a bit more, it looks okay. Like here in particular as well, that one step in between all of them, it turns out that the lots aren't too bad. Oh my goodness, is that gonna... I think it's far enough away from the city that we can not worry about that this time. They're fairly frequent, aren't they? Wow. But yeah, a little bit more of the medium density out here, mixing in a couple of the row houses with some of the medium density. I think there's a little bit of low income in there as well. And then coming over to this side, now I've left this space actually free because there's something I would like to do potentially in this area next episode, so we will come back to that. But we have just continued to flesh out the same designs as we were adding in here. Again, mixing in a few little blocks of row houses every now and then. And then transitioning down into a bit more low density on this corner with a little bit of commercial out the front too, just to serve the people on this side of the road. I also made this bridge so it extends out this way too, and we've got loads of people walking over this. That's really good to see. It's quite a busy bridge, which obviously it would be because it's the main way to cross the rail tracks here without coming out to our roundabout at the end or going up and over this bridge this side. Yeah, liking how that's coming out, and of course we'll continue working on this like I mentioned in the next episode. We also want to introduce some suburbs up the hills around forestry industry, I think, up here too. So Lafayette is far from done, but at least that's a major expansion versus what we had last time. So for today that is going to be it, but if you have enjoyed the episode, likes, comments and shares are really greatly appreciated, and hit that subscribe button to help me get to 30,000 subscribers if you haven't already. And while you're waiting for more content, please do check out one of the videos on screen, but that is all from me for now. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye bye!